Hello, my name is Kathy Potter, and I am a librarian one at the Connecticut State Library Division of Library Development and part of the Children's and YA team. Welcome to a deep dive into the 5 practices of Every Child Ready to Read 2. Today's exploration is of writing. What do we know? What do we know about learning to write? Let's look at the science behind learning to write, learn about current initiatives, and brainstorm ways to incorporate or expand upon activities for more literacy through spaces, programming, and outreach. I want to acknowledge with thanks that this presentation is funded by the State of Connecticut and the Institute of Museum and Library Sciences under the provisions of the Library Services and Technology Act, administered by the Connecticut State Library. A few housekeeping things before I begin in just a moment. I would appreciate if you would change your name to at least your first name and last initial for attendance. And today's session is being recorded, and captions will also be auto-generated and located at the bottom of your screen. The recording, slides, and resources will be available to access on the YouTube playlist for DLD and Children and YA. Suzanne Kiss is joining me today and will monitor the chat and drop links to this and other items as we move through today's session. I will also send out the link via email to everyone here once it is available. Please feel free to add questions along with your insights, comments, and conversation. Just like in story time, your engagement helps keep me energized, and the more we share with each other, the more we will learn from each other. We'll take a break about halfway through, and I will leave time for us to chat at the end. At the end of the presentation, we'll share the link out to a brief survey, and you'll also receive it via email. So please take a moment and fill it out to help share your feedback. Help me help you. Is there anything I missed? Do we have any questions before we begin? Okay. At the end of this session, attendees will be able to identify the different facets of writing, its importance in early literacy and lifelong learning, and ways for librarians to understand how we learn to write, its importance in the early years, and to make your library programs and spaces a place to cultivate the written word. A little background into Every Child Ready to Read. It was first introduced in 2004 as a parent education tool to empower caregivers in helping the children in their care to develop literacy skills. Every Child Ready to Read was developed to break the fourth wall and acknowledge that caregivers were also in the storytime room and would benefit from learning how to support literacy acquisition for the children in their care through their direct messages during programs. Librarians were encouraged to participate in training on how to incorporate activities for children and messages to adults to support a child's development of the 6 skills into their story times and how to present workshops to caregivers about the skills. The 6 skills were print awareness, letter knowledge, phonological awareness, vocabulary, narrative skills, and print motivation. For me, these were honestly a bit of a mouthful, and it was awkward for librarians and caregivers to embrace and integrate them into their practice. So after a review of the program and input from librarians, in 2011, the 6 skills were transformed into 5 practices: talking, singing, reading, writing, and playing. Every Child Ready to Read 2 recognizes that reading and writing are intertwined. Writing helps children understand that sounds are represented by letters and words and that print has meaning. When children are given support during emergent writing, they also develop phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, and narrative skills. Every Child Ready to Read 2 calls the activity of drawing and writing "dwriting," and acknowledges that providing opportunities to practice scribbling, drawing, and early writing helps to develop hand-eye coordination and strengthens the muscles of the fingers and hands for fine motor control and the use of writing implements. If you want to learn more, Kim has information about Every Child Ready to Read on the DLD Children and YA LibGuide. With the research I've done on the 6 practices of early literacy, this is the phrase that sums up what I've been thinking and maybe why I've saved writing for last. Of the 5 practices, writing is perhaps the most difficult one to incorporate into story times. Well said by Suraj Nadkarni-Goting and Pamela Martin-Diaz in their 2013 book, Story Times for Everyone, Developing Young Children's Language and Literacy. Suraj, now retired, created the Star Power workshops for librarians on Every Child Ready to Read that first helped us to understand the research, incorporate it into activities and our libraries and programs, and develop elevator speeches. I was lucky enough to attend the workshop sponsored by DLD. It was the first time I'd been introduced to the concept of elevator speeches and the importance of vocalizing the research-backed elements of programming into digestible opportunities to communicate the importance of what we do. But Suraj and Martin-Diaz, after admitting that writing may be hard to include, remind us how motivating and empowering it is for a child to express themselves in this way, and so we should be encouraging children in their writing. Think back to when you were young. What was the first thing you remembered drawing or writing? And while you're adding that to the chat, I'd like to tell you about mine. It wasn't long after I'd started kindergarten, and I remember sitting at the dining room table with my mom with some paper and pencil. She was teaching me how to write my name, and after some coaxing, I took pencil in hand and proudly wrote it out on my own. Z-A-T-H-Y. Excuse me. In the deep dive into reading, we talked about Scarborough's rope and the interconnected skills that help to strengthen a reader. The writing rope is similar. The 5 main components, critical thinking, syntax, text structure, writing craft, and transcription, can be taught separately, but they need to be integrated when writing. Writers begin to learn about these components through reading, even before putting pencil to paper, but it is through writing that they get to experiment with and express their own thoughts and ideas. I would argue that a writer strengthens their rope by starting with the constrained skills of transcription, then the craft of writing, text structure, and syntax, and finally accessing critical thinking skills, a bottom-up acquisition of skills, as they are displayed in this model. This would align with the writing ropes author Joan Sedita when she talks about the skills of transcription being taught alongside phonics and building alphabetic knowledge. So if we begin to think of transcription as only one component of the skills of writing and their practice as it pertains to Every Child Ready to Read, it becomes much more expansive and may not be as hard as we originally thought. And during the presentation of the deep dive reading, I shared that the concept of enhanced alphabet knowledge instruction, or EAK, developed by researchers Jones, Clark, and Rutzel. Their sixth cycle of instruction is the distinctive visual features letter writing advantage, which focuses on detecting visual aspects of letters, such as their terminations, straight lines, curved lines, diagonal lines, and intersections. Letters that share features are harder to distinguish, and they suggest either implicitly drawing attention to the differences and using mnemonics or pairing them with distinctly different letters to limit confusion. To illustrate this, the only difference between an uppercase C and an uppercase G is a small horizontal line. but the letters Z and O share no features. Believe it or not, written expression begins much earlier and most likely before we even recognize marks as writing. Let's look at the different stages of writing and what can be observed as children move through them. As with other stages of child development, moving through the stages of writing is unique to every child and at their own pace. I looked at information from Reading Rockets, 0 to 3, and the West Hartford Public Schools document on the stages of reading, and here I've combined them to more fully illustrate the progression of writing. Although West Hartford stages were developed in 2010, I chose to include it because of the more detailed information of development within each stage. So let's take a closer look at each of the 5 stages. Young children at the outset make no distinction between drawings and writing. They are one and the same, which makes sense. They're still learning that pictures, letters, and words each have their own meaning that is separate from the other. So during the first stage, at around 15 months to 2.5 years, writing first begins in the form of scribbling or drawing. West Hartford categorizes this as the scribble stage of development in the pre-literate area. It may not look like letters at all, but at this stage, they're exploring how to make marks and express themselves. Some marks are dots, where the crayon met paper, and others are made by large, sweeping motions. As children begin to understand that print carries meaning, they are still working to understand the alphabetic principle. During the second stage, between 2 to 3 years, writing begins to look more recognizable in letter-like formations and circle or square shapes, but it may not coincide with the verbal expression of the writer. Marks are made all over the page, and often at first, a mark means one thing, but upon revisiting, it has taken on a new meaning. Aspects of letters can also be seen within the lines, peaks and valleys, or loops of writing. West Hartford categorizes this as the symbolic and directional stage of pre-literate writing. During the third stage, from about 2.5 to 3.5 years, writing begins to resemble letters, but is still randomly created, and grown-ups will still need help with understanding what a child has written. Although writers most often produce consonants, including the letters in their name, there's a lack of proper spacing and the connection between letters and their sounds. West Hartford categorizes this as the symbolic mock letter stage of pre-literate writing, moving into the string of letters area stage of emergent writing. During the fourth stage, between 3 to 5 years, there is a lot happening. Writers develop the ability to draw something from an idea in their head as their writing evolves to reflect the conventions of writing, matching what they say with what they've written. This is symbolic thinking in action. Writers are also able to distinguish between pictures and writing. At this stage, the quote-unquote concept of word is also developing. This concept emerges when the writers begin to recognize the separation of words and include spaces between them in their writing. Writers also use beginning and ending sounds to represent whole words, or are sometimes able to spell high-frequency words correctly and might use phonetic spelling. Sharing their stories motivates writers to author more works. West Hartford categorizes this as the groups of letters, labeling of pictures, and environmental print stages of emergent writing, moving into the letter-word recognition, first-last letter representation, and medial sound stage of transitional writing. During the fifth stage, between 3 to 5 years, writing becomes more conventional and includes the rules of grammar, correct spelling, punctuation, and proper use of cases. West Hartford categorizes this as fluent writing, including the beginning phrase writing, sentence writing, and what they call the 6 traits of writing. These are the conventions, organization, voice, ideas, word choice, and sentence fluency. Because West Hartford doesn't include ages or grades for their stages of writing, I believe that this final stage of fluent writing most likely occurs closer to the tail end of kindergarten and into first grade. Alongside the stages of writing development, children are developing the grasp they need to be able to control a writing tool. In all, there are 10 steps, and they begin at birth. I invite you to pick up an object with the different grasps to see how they change the level of control and think about how it would affect writing. The first 4 include crude palmar, radial palmar, and raking grasp that span from 3 to 10 months old. And the grasping reflex first appears in utero and can be seen when a finger or object is placed in the palm and the fingers wrap around it. At almost 6 months, this evolves into the crude palmar grasp when an infant intentionally reaches for an object with their fingers, but not their thumb. At 6 months, the palmar grasp is mastered when objects are held with the entire hand, including the thumb. At 7 months, the radial palmar grasp develops when objects are grasped with more of the thumb side of the hand. And at 8 months, the raking grasp is used by bending or flexing the fingers to bring objects into the hand. From 8 to 10 months, the radial digital grasp develops when the pads of the first 2 fingers and the thumbs are used to grasp objects. At 10 months, the pincer grasp, using the tips of the first finger and thumb to quote-unquote pinch an object, appears. Around 12 to 15 months, the thumbs on top fisted grasp, the palmar supinate grasp, is first used for scribbles. Between 2 to 3 years, the digital pronate grasp with all fingers pointing down and whole arm movement is used. This type of grasp can also be observed at this stage with the use of eating utensils. From 3 to 4 years, children switch to using either the quadruped or static tripod grasp with the pads of their fingers and moving a writing tool with the wrist and forearm. Although only dynamic tripod grasp is pictured, both the quadruped and tripod grasps can become dynamic around 5 to 6 years. The tips of the fingers will hold the writing tool at more of an angle, and the movement comes from the fingers with minimal wrist movement and no movement of the forearm. Holding a pen or pencil, which are you, a quadruped or a tripod? You could put a 4 or a 3 into the chat if you want to share. Now that we know what the progression of the ability to hold a pencil is, you might be wondering about how children learn to transcribe letters. The Connecticut Department of Education leaves it up to the district to decide which program they implement. There is a variety of handwriting curriculums, such as Wilson's Foundations, Learning Without Tears, Zahner Blauser, and Hegarty Bridge to Writing. And each one has their own progression of moving through the alphabet to learn how to form each letter in both uppercase and lowercase. So to help support writers in your community, it might be best to reach out to ask someone at the Board of Education about the English language arts curriculum your school district uses. And interestingly, in my research, I did find a lot of resources for occupational therapy and writing. An occupational therapist can help identify and address areas such as fine motor weakness, an inefficient grasp, fine motor precision, visual perception, sensory processing, attention or focus, strength, and executive function skills. So let's take a quick look at each area to know what they are and how they affect writing. So fine motor strength is needed for proper letter formation, sizing, and sustained writing. Fine motor precision affects accuracy, sizing, spacing, neatness, and letter formation. Grasping patterns are important so that letters can be formed correctly and efficiently. Visual perception is the brain's ability to make sense of what the eyes are seeing. Sensory processing through proprioception provides feedback to the brain from muscles and joints. A strong message makes it easy to apply the proper pressure for gripping a writing tool and bearing down on paper. Attention or focus to the task of writing is needed so that information isn't missed or overlooked. Strength in the core and hand, stability of the shoulder, wrist, control of the hand, and good balance are all needed for sitting upright with good posture for writing. Executive function skills needed are the ability to follow directions, stay on task, attention to detail, focusing, sequencing, planning, completion of tasks, neatness, controlling impulses, compliance, behavior, and work tolerance all come into play. Some of these skills are learned through formal instruction beginning in preschool or childcare settings. For children in preschool or childcare settings, the Connecticut Early Learning and Development Standards, or CTELDS, provides descriptions and ideas for promoting development in 8 different domains, including cognition, social and emotional development, physical development and health, language and literacy, creative arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. Skills related to writing are sprinkled throughout the document and can be found by using keyword searches such as writing, drawing, fine and gross motor skills, and communication. The document is broken down by age brackets: 0 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, 12 to 18 months, 18 to 24 months, 24 to 36 months, 3 to 4 years, and 4 to 5 years. And the Connecticut ELDS serves as a great resource for expanding developmental milestones, suggestions for adults engaging with children at each age, and ways to support children with disabilities or those who are dual language learners. And according to the Kids Count Data Center, the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and Connecticut Voices for Children, as of 2023, 77% of Connecticut's young children are enrolled in school, but that still means that about 1 in 4 children is not benefiting from participating in a school readiness program, but they might be attending a library program.
Kathy, before you go on, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we do have a question in the chat.
Sure.
Someone's asking, is grasp development impacted by the dominant hand? Does left or right-handedness make a difference?
I didn't look into its dependence on right or left-handedness. So that would be something that I could look into and get back to you on that. Thank you for asking.
That's all we have in the chat for right now.
Okay, thank you. In Connecticut, writing is integrated into the curriculum for literacy, English language arts, or ELA. And this illustration comes from the New York State Department of Education and shows how, quote, reading fuels the writing with ideas, language, and ways to structure and illuminate the written piece's purpose. And writing promotes a deeper understanding of any text, further building language, such as home language or English for English language learners, knowledge and communication skills, end quote. If you notice, this is superimposed on top of two arrows pointing to the right, indicating that these connections move along a continuum. So reading fuels ideas, it models ways to structure ideas, developing a writer's purpose, and building language and knowledge. And writing fuels ideas, developing understanding or deepening understanding of text, building language and knowledge, and developing comprehension processes. So I just think that's really cool. It's the infinity symbol, and then just imagining that moving along that continuum. So it's constantly growing or evolving and changing with learning and reading and writing. The New York State Department of Education further states that, quote, reading and writing both demand 1, active construction of meaning, 2, interactions with text, 3, development and activation of conceptual and background knowledge or schema, and 4, development of the big 6 skills and competencies, end quote. So what are those big 6 skills? They are oral language, phonological awareness, phonics, comprehension, fluency, and vocabulary. And they're the same skills that Connecticut organizes their areas of literacy instruction around, which is based on the science of reading. Connecticut also uses the not so simple view of writing framework developed in 2006 by Virginia Barringer, which emphasizes writing as a complex and multi-component process. This framework incorporates transcription, working memory, and executive functions in generating text. Transcription skills are considered lower level or constrained. Once you learn how to make letters or type on a keyboard, you can't improve upon it because you know where the keys are, you know how to form something. You might be able to get faster, but there's not a lot of growth there. Executive function skills and self-regulation processes help writers to stay focused on the task at hand. Working memory serves as the place to hold what the writer wants to say so that they can figure out how to say it. And text generation is the result of the 3 skills coming together. In Connecticut, students entering kindergarten are assessed in the fall for skills they currently possess. This data informs what needs to be taught during a given school year. Teachers need to know what knowledge the students in the classroom already possess and what they need to learn. Each year, students entering kindergarten through 3rd grade participate in a universal screening assessment and are rated on both their physical, motor, and literacy skills, along with language, numeracy, creative aesthetic, and personal social skills. Students are then given a rating level of 1, 2, or 3. At performance level 1, students demonstrate emergent skills and require a large degree of support. At performance level 2, students inconsistently demonstrate the skills and require some support. At performance level 3, students demonstrate the skills and require minimal support. There are two areas where writing is explicitly assessed, the areas of physical motor and literacy skills. Let's look at how Connecticut students fared. So if we look at the physical motor skills, the assessment observed, the level at a child can run, jump, or balance, kick or throw a ball, climb stairs or dance, write or draw using instruments such as markers, chalk, or pencils, and perform tasks such as completing puzzles, stringing beads, or cutting with scissors. The assessment covers both fine and gross motor skills with some observation of spatial awareness and attention to task. In literacy skills, the assessment observes the level at which a child holds a book and turns the pages from the front to the back, understands that print conveys meaning, explores books independently, recognizes printed letters, especially in their name and familiar printed words, matches or connects letters and sounds, identifies some initial sounds, and demonstrates emergent writing. So what do you think the statewide percentages were for physical motor and literacy skills for each performance level? If you want to put it in the chat, I'll give you a moment to do that before I change slides. No one's brave enough to take a guess? All right, let's take a look at the data. Oh, 75%. All right. So is that for which level and for which assessment area? 65 for literacy. All right, thanks for your guesses. Let's take a look. So the most current data is for the 2024-2025 school year, which shows that in the fall, 56.3% of kindergarten students demonstrated needing minimal support for the skills assessed in physical and motor development, and 41.2% of kindergarten students demonstrated needing minimal support for the skills assessed in literacy development. A little more than half of the children entering kindergarten with minimal support can run, jump, or balance, can kick or throw a ball, climb stairs or dance, write or draw using writing implements, and perform tasks such as completing puzzles, stringing beads, or cutting with scissors. And less than half of the children entering kindergarten with minimal support show interest in books, can hold a book and turn its pages correctly, recognize printed letters, especially those in their own name, understands that print has meaning, can connect letters with sounds, can identify the initial sounds of some words, or demonstrate emergent writing skills. Does anything stand out to you when looking at these two metrics? You want to put your thoughts in the chat? Is there anything that you wonder about? Yeah, the low 9.4. So that means that there's only 9.4% of kids entering kindergarten need a lot of help with their physical and motor skills. So I see wondering if kids are not being read to as much at home, more tablets, etc. Possibly. So for me, I wondered how children who are not demonstrating emergent writing skills are also able to write and draw with writing instruments. I was having a hard time believing that both are true. But when I looked back to West Hartford's definition of an emergent writer, the skills include writing groups of letters with spaces in between, matching beginning sounds with a letter to label a picture, and an ability to copy letters or words of environmental print, which means to me that the underlying skills are there. They just need more practice to level up their skills. So I see there's a comment that fine motor and gross motor skills are absolutely connected to pre-reading and literacy skills, 100%. So although I'm sharing the statewide data with you, you can go to the charts to see how children in your town fared. It is interesting to see the data. Which is why if a data set is available, I like to look at it to see what might reveal. And interestingly, the statewide data available from 2014 through 2024 does show some improvement over the last 11 years. There has been a decrease in students that need the most support, as illustrated by the blue lines for level 1. There has also been a decrease in the number of students that need some support, as illustrated by the red lines for level 2. And there has been a steady increase in the number of students that come to school needing minimal support, as illustrated by the green lines for level 3. So looking at the data for physical motor development, I might infer that since there's been an increased focus on physical activity since COVID, that maybe more time was like spent outdoors at the park. Anybody else have thoughts on this? I also wondered about the impact of the timing of these assessments and what it has on a child's performance. Writing that begins before a child can accurately form letters and words as we recognize them, which means that they must verbally express or interpret their marks. And to continue writing, a child needs encouragement that their writing is important and has meaning. So if a child is uncertain or hasn't had positive support in their writing, it may take time for them to build the confidence to write for a teacher or other adult performing an assessment. It's just one thought I had. Yeah, have any others, please share them in the chat. So, what can libraries do to support reading in the early years? To start, I'd like to share my suggestions for best practices in library spaces based on readingrocket.org's list of the 12 best practices to support writing in the early childhood classroom, authored by Hope K. Gerd, Gary E. Bingham, and Barbara A. Wasick. So the first one is build writing into program plans to create opportunities for frequent writing experiences. 2, Accept all forms by celebrating and supporting scribbling, drawing, the appearance of letter-like shapes, and letters as writing skills are developed. 3, explicitly model writing with children and talk about how and what you write by drawing attention to the writing process. 4, model language around scaffolding a child's writing by providing hints and prompts. 4, encourage children to read what they write and encourage them to share it with others. 6, encourage invented spelling and writing what they hear. 7, make writing opportunities meaningful in making predictions, observations, and summaries with letters, lists, maps, charts, and graphs, and not just through individual letter writing practice. 8 is have writing materials in all centers, including a variety of writing tools, papers, alphabet posters, and theme-based word cards. 9, engage in group writing experiences so that all children have an opportunity to be involved and then display it for future reference. 10, make writing a way to connect by supporting families in understanding the importance of meaningful writing experiences. 11, use technology to support writing with interactive boards, computer programs, and stylus pens. And 12, encourage fine and gross motor activity to build muscle, eye-hand coordination, and bilateral coordination. So using this list of suggestions, let's look at more concrete ideas. Starting with what we do best, by including books about writing and collections and programs. One resource is the Colorado Libraries for Early Literacy, CLEL, which has a wealth of information to support the 5 early literacy practices. They have printable tips on each of them that could be used individually as asides during conversations or programs, on signs inviting exploration of an activity, or together as they have been created. CLEL also recognizes high-quality children's books that support early literacy development through the annual CLEL Bell Awards in English and the biannual Spanish CLEL Bell Awards. 5 books are announced as the winners, which have been selected from a short list of 25 books. In addition, CLEL offers professional resources, information on school readiness, building readers, and storytime skill builders, and a collection of multilingual songs and rhymes called Story Blocks. Another cache of information is the Early Childhood Education Resource Hub of the University of Virginia, which provides mentoring videos on taking dictation, modeling writing, and promoting writing. They've also selected 3 books to illustrate how to support writing through books, including the wordless book Wave by Susie Lee, Alma and How She Got Her Name by Juana Martinez Neal, and A Letter to Amy by Ezra Jack Keats. And to encourage more writing at stations, they include activity cards with ideas such as make a list, with examples of list ideas and sample dialogue to introduce the activity. In addition, the ECE Resource Hub has a page dedicated to early writing and encouraging toddlers to use pictures and words to express their ideas, including more mentoring videos, books, and activities. In story times, there are lots of ways to encourage early writing, beginning with the moment a family walks into the room. Early literacy in your story times at your library, partnering with Caregivers for Success by Suraj Nadkarni Goting and Pamela Martinez Diaz suggests having children write their own name tags or complete a sign-in sheet, along with including finger plays, the use of graphs and charts, and incorporating writing into take-home or craft activities. There are also activities to promote fine and gross motor muscle development. The Power of Play, Designing Early Learning Spaces by Dorothy Stoltz, Marissa Kohner, and James Bradbury suggest including sensory toys for babies and activities involving squeezing clothespins for toddlers. In Baltimore County's Storyville is featured and highlights the ways that letters and writing are incorporated throughout, from alphabet blocks and magnetic letters to a mailroom play area in their play village. Step into story time using story time effective practice to strengthen the development of newborns to 5-year-olds by Suraj Nadkarni Goting and Kathy Flynn-Klatt includes a multi-aged storytime plan called This Is Where I Draw the Line, with books, songs, and activities for each age. These plans are great for a large range of ages from birth to 5 by starting off engaging with focus on infants, moving into toddlers, and ending with preschoolers. When I've used them, I invited families to feel free to step out if their child needed a break, but be sure to return for the bubbles at the end. Parent tips are included in this program plan, and I especially love this one about empowerment to, quote, make art a regular part of playtime with a variety of materials and encourage your child's attempts to write. Be creative, get out your crayons, markers, paint, and imagination, and create your own scribbles and lines, end quote. To support the development of muscles used in the fine and gross motor activity of writing, there are lots of activities that can be incorporated into story times, music and movement, or school readiness programs. ShapeAmerica.org has activities appropriate for indoors and outdoors, incorporating different props such as beach balls, paper plates, and hoops in both English and Spanish. They also have move, play, and learn activities for infants, toddlers, and pre-K in English and Spanish. And these would be great to incorporate into stations during playgroups, as activities for music and movement, or as transitions during story times. Each activity can be printed in either English or Spanish, and the pre-K activities include a recipe on the second side. Stories, Songs, and Stretches by Katie Scherer, available through the Service Center, includes lots of gross motor activities and those that incorporate crossing the midline to strengthen the connection between the hemispheres of the brain. Snap Ed Connection provides links to various resources and state departments of health for ideas in physical activity, both indoor and outdoor, for children and families, and for anyone with limitations or disabilities and older adults. Connecticut State Department of Education refers to this one as one of the resources for school districts in developing physical education curriculum. And the activeacademics.org site offers a list of activities, including those for pre-K. This list can be sorted by grade level, activity area, including space or connection to standards, and keyword. They also include an active at-home section with more resources. And Let's Move in Libraries is another space to explore. The Let's Move Stories section provides information from libraries and the programs they offer to promote health and wellness in their communities. You can sign up for their newsletter, or you can also view recordings of their webinars. So let's do a little brainstorming. So in the picture, you can see there's a train table. And many libraries have train tables, but I'm thinking maybe not any writing activities are currently included. So I would like you to brainstorm some writing activities that you could add to the train table in your library. Think about the process of getting on a train, what you need, how you figure out where you're going. All right, we've got some brainstormers on this afternoon. So let kids make signs for the items in the train table town is one suggestion. Another is letter train cars to link and make words. Ooh, could have a travel checklist. Another one is map making. What else? Why might you get on a train? Could wrap the wooden blocks in paper and they can make their own characters or buildings. Yeah. Could make up names of places you are traveling to. People could make train tickets. All right, so there's concern about not writing on the train table itself. Any ideas on how you might discourage that activity? Using mini whiteboards? Yeah, that's one idea. Could you include information or a way to write like an invitation, like taking a trip, being invited somewhere to go somewhere, figuring out what time you need to be there, where the event is taking place, who is included or who is traveling. Ah, I see an idea where you could wrap the whole train table in paper so kids can write on the paper and not the train table itself. Yeah, I saw a photo of another train table that was actually not glued down to the table and they just used it on like a regular table. That would be an easy way to make that happen if you have your if you have some tracks and things that are separate from the table. Seems obvious, but maybe using washable writing tools. Although I would debate that washable crayon is that easy to get off. All right, any other thoughts about implementing writing activities into a train table station? Could you make labels for the containers for where the items need to be stored when a child is finished playing? Possibly. Or if you could have any other ideas. Ultra washable crayons. Oh, all right. We have a testimony to those. All right. Thanks for brainstorming with me. If you're looking for more ideas, the National Association for the Education of Young Children, or NIAC, has a useful resource on emergent writing for learning centers and how to add meaningful writing materials and literacy props to them. And they have suggestions for 5 areas. Discovery, we might call it like science. The blocks, dramatic play, an independent writing station, and outdoor play. And these suggestions help to connect the area with real world examples of writing. So, for example, in the science area, one suggestion is to have paper and sticks to create seed packet labels. In the block area, providing graph paper notebook labeled blueprints. In dramatic play, there are areas for a veterinary or ideas for a veterinary pet clinic with associated props like file folders on a pet's health and notebooks for writing instructions for home care. And in the writing area, adding different types of letters to promote alphabetic knowledge. In outdoor play, suggested activities include using magnifying glasses and notebooks to record observations and discoveries, and the use of chalk or painting with water to write on sidewalks. And one last thing I want to share today is that I found these alphabet blocks in a variety of languages on the website kodokids.com. And I just was amazed. There are a number of languages available. And they also have other pre-literacy products that are listed, but I kind of thought that maybe libraries might be able to replicate them on their own. So I would take a look at that to see what ideas that sparks. And then I was also thinking that Thingiverse might be a cool place to take a look for some 3D printed literacy and writing tools. I did see some tracers where you could use like a stencil to write letters with the arrows on the direction that the pencil should go in. So thank you so much for joining me today for this deep dive into the Every Child Ready to Read practice of writing. And today's recording will be available on the Connecticut State Library's Division of Library Development page, Children and YA Services Professional Development Early Literacy tab. I'll send the link out to everyone who registered along with a list of resources I mentioned and more. If you could also take a minute or two to fill out the survey, I would appreciate it. So Suzanne, if you wouldn't mind turning off the recording.